Tonight I'm going to be talking about long-term living, the long-term side effects that a lot of childhood cancer survivors face, as well as any child who's had a disease, disability, or disorder. Probably wondering, who am I? I am a senior at Bedford High School. I'm going to be turning 19 in 3 weeks. I am the wrestling team manager of all things that I could possibly do. I will be attending college in the fall. I'm going to be a forensic science major. While I haven't committed to any college yet, I will most likely be attending Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York. You're probably wondering, why am I here? You know, we just chose a random person to talk to you, honestly. But I am a childhood cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with Stage IV Neuroblastoma in 2005 at the age of 10. The treatment consisted of 5 rounds of chemotherapy, localized radiation, and a stem cell transplant. I was supposed to have a second one, but apparently they say, once we've almost killed you once, we try not to do it again. And I just put this picture in so I could brag about how cute I was. So, once again, why am I here? Long-term results. I am legally deaf. I have a hearing aid on one side and a cochlear implant on the other. I am 4 foot 8 inches and done growing. Lots of fun.
But your clothes are cheaper.
Kids section. My friends call me Baby Gap. I have osteoporosis and joint pain, a compromised immune system, and I have been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Now the party's getting started. I want everyone to know that long-term isn't simple, it isn't pretty, and it isn't necessarily lucky. In this presentation, I'll be referring to people who have faced an illness or disability as the all-consuming we. I do not assume that everyone is like me or that I represent them all. Quite the contrary. Each person is individual and unique. However, there are similarities between us, no matter how vague. What is a long-term side effect? It's a side effect that occurs during or after the main treatment phase and lasts for a considerable amount of one's life. So a long-term side effect isn't typically what side effect you get during the treatment, but what that treatment gives you that you have to deal with usually the rest of your life, but can be just for an extremely long period of time. Why am I talking about long-term side effects? I'd like to change people's view on survivorship. There is no such thing as, you survived, it's over. It never ends. It's not like, okay, you can stop talking about it now, it happened years ago. No, it's still going on. It's still happening, and it probably always will. I would like to make people think twice before they say something generic like, well, you are just so lucky to be alive, when other people don't have that privilege. They don't understand what that means, and while it may be true, it doesn't always feel so true, with all the struggles that you face day to day. I want people to know that being a survivor can be like being any other person with a permanent disease, disorder, or disability. And I want the public to be aware that after diagnosis, despite any type of cure, life does not return to normal. It might return to a new normal, but it doesn't return to normal. Interacting with the world, it has a lot to do with our emotional wellness. How does it affect how we interact with the world? People with an illness, disability, or anyone who has gone through a traumatic experience deals with emotions differently. That's not saying we're basket cases or emotionally broken. We can just be a little more sensitive sometimes because when you've gone through so many emotionally challenging situations, far more than the average person has to endure. These normal emotional situations can be twice as difficult for us to navigate and go through because we're already dealing with so much that the average person isn't going through. And just like when you bottle up all your emotions and eventually explode, we do it too, just probably twice as much. Sometimes there's just too much to deal with, and not even anything in particular. Sometimes we'll start crying for no reason, just because life sucks. And as a parent, you're gonna wanna be there and be like, what's wrong, and your kid's not gonna tell you. And sometimes you just have to accept, we don't know. We have no idea why we're crying. It's like when you're overtired and you start laughing for nothing, for no reason. Basically what happens. And the worst thing you can do is repeatedly ask us what is wrong. Because our response of I don't know isn't being secretive. We're not being secretive teenagers who are like, you know what, I don't want you knowing about my boyfriend problems or anything because you're going to butt into my life. We literally have no idea what's wrong. And the more you push, the more we're probably going to lash out because we're confused, we're hurt, and we don't know why. And trying to figure out why seems like an impossible task. Because sometimes there just isn't a why. Sometimes there's so many things going on in your subconscious that it's like, I'm shutting down, the world sucks, and I need to leave. Our interactions with the world, while based on our emotions, also have a lot to do with a different type of interactions we have. One of the very common ones we most likely go through is the medical world. You know, it's probably about half of our lives. Our doctors might be your friends at this point, probably have inside jokes. Now with the medical world, there's a fine line between being caring and controlling. And that starts to change as the child gets older. It can be harder for us to grow up because our timeline for maturity has been thrown off. It's not like, okay, you turn 13, this is where you should be. It's, okay, I got diagnosed at this age, I just had to become a 25-year-old, and now I go back to school and I have the emotional stability of a 10-year-old. And I have no idea how to get through this. So while it does take a lot of caring and reassuring and everything, you have to be careful not to baby, because eventually we will have to go out into the world and learn it on our own. There are a lot of unhelpful things, but there's also a lot of helpful things. Some of the unhelpful things are sudden transitions. When a child turns 18, all of a sudden they have everything to take care of. And you want to make sure your child is taking part in their medical care along the way. So it's very hard when you have no responsibility and then you turn 18 and it's full responsibility. You'll find that we will find ourselves staring at an almost empty pill bottle, ranting at some poor doctor's secretary about how long it takes to get an appointment. What do you mean the soonest appointment is 3 weeks from now? My pills run out in 5 days. These are the pills that keep me emotionally stable. Do not tell me that is not your problem. I should have scheduled earlier. You will deal with an emotionally unstable teenager crying in your office. We don't understand the idea of, oh, it takes 3 weeks to get that appointment. I mean, whatever happens, our experience with doctors is, I feel sick. Your mom calls the pediatrician. You get in that afternoon. And we think all doctors work that way. They don't. Which reminds me, I should probably make some appointments. Still pretty bad at that myself. And doctors that treat us like we're an invalid. Some doctors just want to hear everything from the parent. And while that is good at a young age, the older we get, the more difficult it becomes. There's a certain age where you have to find a doctor that will interact with your child in an appropriate manner that treats your kid as the young adult they are becoming. Because the mix between pediatricians and child doctors in hospitals and adult, it really jumps. There's nothing transitioning unless you take that slowly yourself. There's no doctors that are like, oh, we specialized in teenagers who are becoming young adults, and we make that transition seamless. It's kind of left up to you. Like, how are we going to juggle this? One time we're going to a doctor and they're like, oh no, sweetie, let me hear everything from your parents so you don't get it wrong. To the next time, they're looking at you like, why are your parents telling me what's wrong with you? Like, you're a human being, you can talk. Things that are helpful, however, is letting the child play a role in their healthcare. It teaches us responsibility, it teaches us how to get out there, even if we're never going to be completely on our own. It teaches us how to take care of ourselves so that we can have a sense of responsibility and a purpose, that we're not sitting around waiting for other people to do stuff for us. Medical calendars. I can't stress this enough. Having an organizational method that is easy for your child to understand so that they can either help all along the way or do it themselves later on. If I had a calendar, I would probably be much better at this. Because honestly, right now, it's kind of like, oh, hey mom, you want to call them and make an appointment for whenever they're available because I have no idea. I don't know what I'm doing. And it's kind of a scary idea, like, oh, I'm going to run out of all those medications because I have no idea what I'm doing. I didn't know I was supposed to schedule it a month in advance. When you leave the office, they're like, oh, you want to schedule an appointment now? No, I'll call back once I check my schedule. Well, I checked my schedule. Everything's available, and I still don't want to go. And finding doctors that your child likes. You may be thinking, my child doesn't have to like the doctor. I mean, as long as they do a good job, it just, their expertise is what we're going there for, not a friend. And that may be true when they're young, but once they turn 18, everything will change. And around the age of 16, you should probably start allowing your child to switch any doctors they dislike and look for ones they like. That way, it's not like, oh, you turned 18, you can pick your own doctors. No 18-year-old is going to spend their time online going through your medical insurance, finding providers, and saying, oh, their name sounds lovely, I would like to visit them. And a lot of times, you're going to doctors that are giving you bad news, and your child's not going to want to go. If it's a doctor they don't like, they're going to want to go even less. Just the other day, my mom was asking me, oh, did you make an appointment for that growth specialist? You mean a lady who's like 4 inches taller than me that keeps making fun of how I'm never going to grow any taller, and her advice on having children would wind me up on MTV's 16 and Pregnant? No, I haven't, amazingly. Amazingly, I have not scheduled an appointment with her in about 2 years. And I mean, if I had had help finding one that I actually liked, that I didn't feel like I was going there and being told, you are never going to grow any taller, and I grew 2 inches taller, so I kind of just want to shove that in her face. I mean, it would really have helped to find one that I liked, and now I wouldn't be like, I wonder if something's going to go wrong. I guess I'll just find out eventually when they keep calling and asking why I haven't scheduled an appointment. And apparently the correct answer is not, I just don't like you. And life at school. School is stressful. It really is. For anyone. Middle school, high school, it can be a tough time for any child. You add an illness or disability into the mix, and you can never be sure what will happen. Some things that are unhelpful for even anyone that isn't having to deal with all of this is unclear late policies. At my school, it's like you miss 2 days, you get 2 days to make up that work. Seems clear enough, right? But what happens when you miss 3 days? You're in the next day. You miss another 2 days. You're in for 4 days, and you miss a week. How much time do I have to make up that work now? The principal can't even figure it out. We literally have meetings, and he's like, I don't know. That is helpful. Let me tell you, that is so helpful. So you really have to talk with your school and set out a plan, even if they don't know, for every student. To find out for your student. How long do I have to make this up? Because if I'm missing 3 days, and I come in for 1 day, and I miss the next 4, Those first 3 days I missed, are those due as soon as I get back? Because technically I went to school for 1 day, so it's been the 3 days since I haven't been absent for a week straight. But it's complicated because you don't have time to go in, you don't have time to get help. And you need to know how those late policies work so that you can work with teachers outside of school, so you can work with tutors or something else. Another problem is miscommunication. Between the numerous teachers, principal, possibly a case manager or a paraprofessional, it's very easy for things to be miscommunicated or forgotten. It's a teacher's child to be proactive and stand up for themselves, and keep the individual teachers as updated as possible on the child attendance and progress with makeup work. I'll admit I didn't do a great job at this in high school. There were times it was like, okay, I guess I'm being a 0 on this assignment because I didn't communicate. And it's hard when you have a case manager or something else and you've had it for so long. When you get to high school, there's this time where you're supposed to transition to, oh, they're not taking care of everything for me anymore. I need to communicate for myself. When did this happen? When did someone tell me? Did anyone tell me? Or was it just something I was supposed to know? And so it's hard when you're doing that because teachers don't know what's going on with you most of the time. You know what's going on with you. You know, okay, my child's been sick, that's why they haven't been in. They didn't get the makeup work done yet because they have been sleeping all day or they've had a killer migraine. But that teacher could be thinking, you know, you had 3 days to make that up. I mean, what were you doing, watching TV? No, I was sleeping. But they don't understand, for us, sleep isn't, oh, I am feeling lazy. Sleep is, I don't feel well. I need to escape from it for a while. Sometimes you get a headache that you cannot control, that you cannot handle, and the only way to get away from it is to sleep and go into this alternate reality. Another problem is a teacher's inability to meet the students' extra needs in a flowing, natural manner. It is obviously a difficult job to be a teacher. If I was a teacher, I think my students would be terrified of me. I don't know how teachers handle it when students are throwing things across the room and not knowing how to be quiet. It takes all of me to not yell at these people to just shut up in the middle of class when I'm trying to listen. But one of the most embarrassing things in high school was the process that occurred once a teacher started a movie without captioning for me. And this whole process starts. I raise my hand, they're like, oh, I forgot captioning, and they start fumbling around with it on their computer, trying to figure out how to make it work. And of course there always had to be one student that goes, why do we need captioning? Just start the movie and turn the volume up. I don't know, why do you need audio? That's why I need captioning. We're not all super hearing, super normal people. And teachers don't understand how simple it could be to say something like, I find that captioning makes it easier for everyone to follow along. Having both an audio and visual increases learning, so that we don't feel like we're an alien species being pointed out and singled out. And, you know, it's embarrassing, even in elementary school, but especially when you get to high school when everyone is trying to fit in. It's like, oh, you need something extra, huh? Kids are cruel. They don't understand things, so they make fun of it. But how can you make them understand? You really can't. But I mean, no hearing person could understand the satisfaction I felt when we watched a foreign video in class. It was a movie, and everything was in a Middle Eastern language. So the movie had captioning. All the other students started complaining that the captioning was going by too fast, that they couldn't read it in time. Slow it down. And with a straight face, I really tried not to smirk. But why do you need captioning? Surely you can just increase the volume and you'll be able to understand it just fine. Or my favorite example, in sign language at my school, the second year, they make the students go around between classes, like that 5 minutes when you're going from class to class, and you talk with all your friends. They make them wear earplugs. My friends would come up to me, people I'd known for 3 years, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, do you know how terrible this is trying to walk around this hallway in high school and you can't hear what anyone is saying? I'm like, what are you, where have you been? Welcome to my world every single day. Try wearing those for an hour. Forget about 5 minutes walking through a hallway. All you were missing was a bunch of people trying to make out in the hallway, which is disgusting, and a bunch of people yelling to move so they can get through the hallway. You're not missing anything. Try wearing those during class and see what grades you get. See how well you do in that class. Some of the helpful things for school. For IEPs, I imagine a lot of you here have a lot of experience with IEPs. And case managers help so much. For me, it really helped reduce the workload and organizes everything, provides an advocate for your child. And it's hard not having that advocate as you start to transition out of it. You get so used to them doing everything for you. So it really is, it helps you and it hurts you in a way. It helps you in the beginning, but you have to learn to stand up for yourself eventually. And it's hard when all of a sudden, the schools aren't the best at starting this transition. It kind of happens like junior year, everything was taken care of. All of a sudden you walk into senior year, it's like, oh, I didn't tell your teachers that, you're supposed to. If you're gonna be in college next year, you gotta know how to do this. I don't know how to do it. No one told me, no one taught me, and it's very difficult to understand that because you start off having all these amazing expectations, and then you're like, I feel like I'm really screwed up. I'm feeling pretty behind, and I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to interact with these teachers. When I interact with adults, our interactions with adults are much different. You're not usually dealing with them as an authority figure. You're dealing with doctors or something else, and it's always someone that's doing something for you that has to listen to you and what you have to say. So when you go to these authority figures, sometimes it's like, I don't know how to talk to them without getting sent to the principal's office for being rude. That can be awkward. Also, tutors. In my IEP, we talked a lot about tutors. And we made it so that if I missed so many days of school, that the school would provide a tutor to help. Because tutoring is ridiculously expensive. As someone who needed a tutor one time that the school didn't cover, it kind of sucks. As someone who's been a paid tutor, it's kind of awesome. But teachers only have so many hours available for one-on-one help. And it's hard to understand, like, you think, okay, they get there at that time in the morning that your student does, and they leave at that time. That's not even a 9-to-5 job. Surely, they've got extra time. But a lot of these teachers, they might have a second job. They've got families at home to take care of. They have grading papers that they're doing at home that especially students don't consider, like, oh, they actually do things outside of school. And so it's very hard to get one-on-one time with a teacher, and when you do, there's other people looking for one-on-one time. So tutors were incredible with helping for that, and the school would even provide tutors over vacations. When I had a concussion one year, and I missed like midterms all the way towards the finals, and they would send a tutor just so I could take that midterm, and just basically be babysat by a tutor, just so that I would get through that year. And obviously it's not very economical for them, but if you find a good school, a good case manager, a good IEP, you can get that done. I can't even explain how helpful the person from Dana-Farber was. We had an organizer, an IEP consultant from Dana-Farber that would come to my meetings and really know exactly what we would need and know how to get it. Because when as a parent, you're there arguing with these people for what you need, a lot of times they're thinking, you're just a parent, you don't know exactly how this works. But when you have that professional that deals with it all the time, they know, okay, they mean business. They know we can do this, so I guess we're going to have to do it. Because schools, I'm not going to say they don't want to put in the effort for all this, but they're not exactly looking forward to it. They don't wake up in the morning and say, yes, I've got a meeting to figure out all the extra things I need to do for the rest of the year. This is going to be exciting. No, I think they usually sigh and kind of roll their eyes when I walk in. And finally, interactions with the family. It's complicated, especially if you have a child who's going through something like this and a child who's not. I know my brother definitely resented me for years for it. And of course, you get angry at them for it. Because you're like, why are you upset about this? You didn't have to go through any of it. Wow, I guess some special food that you can't eat or something. And you're gonna be angry about it. But at the same time, it took me a long time to realize that he was going through some of it at the same, not on the same level I was, but in general, he was going through it. He didn't have my parents there with him when I was in the hospital. And it's hard to understand that. It's hard as a parent to see both sides and be able to reach out to all of your children, and know how to react. Because you spend so much time on a child that needs all of this extra. But sometimes you think, oh, the other one's doing just fine, they don't need this. But they want it, is the problem. But they only want it to a certain extent. They want the attention. They don't want there's about 500 new rules now because, we're worried about your medical safety and all that, so you can't be alone, ever. Then they'll run away. Some of the unhelpful things we found was the coddling and the controlling, and it's so great to have a family that cares about you. So great. But with this type of situation, parents become overly attached almost. Not overly attached, but they become more attached than some other parents do to their children. Because they've been through everything with their children. They've been there as they worried, are you going to get better from this? How are you going to survive this? And they've been fighting for their kid all along. And so when that child starts to grow up, it's hard to move on almost. And I've definitely experienced that with my parents. I'd be like, Mom, I'm 16. I can go out, I can do something. And now I'm like, Mom, I'm almost 19. I have my own car, I'm going to college. You don't need to know where I am every second. I do not need to text you saying, okay, I am now going to the gas station, and now I'm going to go to Target. Just implant me with the GPS chip. We know you already have, just start tracking it. But it's hard to understand that, like any child, they need their personal space. They need to not be forced into all of these ways that you think is best for them. Because while it does help to a certain extent, it can cause resentment. I can't count how many times my parents would be like, you just need to do this, and I'd be like, I don't want to. What makes you think you know what's best for me? It's not your life, it's mine. A lot of times they were right.
Thank you.
But I only admit that because they're not here. And if I hadn't kind of rebelled and done my own thing, so in some ways I wouldn't have learned anything. And even though we have additional needs in some ways, we need to learn the same way. We need to be able to make our own mistakes, and why that can be even more terrifying for the parents because you're more afraid of the outcome because we can't interact with the world the same as everyone else. We're never going to be able to interact with the world if we don't make our own mistakes. And then sharing the child's life story with everyone. It's a problem. It's a big problem. I understand. Your child is a big part of your life. You want to talk to, your friends and everything about it. Now what gets weird is when I walk into the bank with my dad and the banker looks at me, she's like, hi Michelle, how are you doing? How did this treatment go? I'm like, what, are you stalking me? My dad's like, oh yeah, I told her all about what you're going through. So you just found a random bank teller and told them my life story. and yet it's dangerous for me to talk online about my age. Hypocrisy at its best. Now for some of the helpful things. Personal boundaries and personal space. It's like with any child, with any person, as they're becoming a teenager especially, you probably want to cling on and be like, I want to be involved in every aspect of your life and help you through everything. Don't. Do the world a favor. Don't try to do it. And when they do share something with you, don't latch onto it. The amount of times I will literally try to share something with my parents, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, this cute guy today was talking to me, you know, definitely got a crush on him. For the next week, every single day I get out of school, maybe next month. So, did that guy talk to you today? No, he didn't. Amazingly, we aren't stalker buddies. No, just trying to share a little information without, you know, getting third-degree burn and interrogation. I didn't murder anyone. You know, we can calm down. So having that personal boundaries and that personal space and understanding, okay, I am super excited my child just shared something with me. If you want them to do it again, don't ask questions. We want to be able to feel like, you know, it's our choice to share things with you, not, oh, this is obligatory, you're our parents, you rule over us, you need to know every detail of our lives, and we are never going to escape. Because that's what it can feel like. And then staying consistent. In everyone's crazy, hectic lives that are already complicated by these health issues, gotta try to make day-to-day life as simple and unconfusing as possible. If you have rules, stick with them. There's definitely gonna be times where you're gonna be like, I know we have this rule, but they're just feeling so bad today, I don't wanna deal with that, like I don't wanna make them feel any worse. The problem is, once rules get bent, we're like, oh, it got bent once, I can totally do this again. Like, oh, all I gotta do is be sick. I feel horrible. Totally gotta help me out here. I don't wanna go to school. Can't do it. We probably can, honestly, at some point. There's probably been at least 5 times where your child's like, I can't get out of bed. We can. We just have no motivation to. And once again, I'm saying this because my parents aren't here. Standards. They're impossible to understand for someone who has the same standards everywhere to where standards are constantly changing. And we're held to different standards at times. But that doesn't mean that it's less work for us. And that's something that took me a long time to understand. Because other people may not understand because we don't often understand it ourselves. And I'm not trying to brag by this story, it's something I want to share because it really, to me, it shows how what I've been through has affected the way I view things psychologically on my own success. This past weekend, I was at Hofstra University for their Trustee Scholar Weekend, and the Trustee Scholars are 30 students that are chosen to receive full tuition scholarships. And I'm there with all these students, and everyone's talking about the advanced placement, the IB classes they take, the mathletes, science Olympiads, and so many extracurriculars. You'd think, how do they sleep? Like, are they awake all day? Do they have like 7 days of school a week? And I'm thinking, what am I doing here? Like, I know I did good in school, but I wasn't involved in all these extracurriculars. I wasn't doing mathletes. We don't even have science Olympiads. I didn't know what that was. And AP, IB classes, I started out getting out of high school, and I'm like, okay, I'm in all honors classes. And every year I did less and less and less. So I'm thinking, are these people way better off than me for taking these classes? Like, why was I chosen to get this when clearly there are people more qualified? And as I was sitting in the dorm room later that night with my student host, Gwen, she was amazing, I told her that I didn't feel like I fit in there. Well, it was like I had a fun night with them. We went out to New York City. I'd never been. But as they're talking about all this school stuff, it's like, why am I here? How did I get here? And I told her, I feel like I don't deserve this. I feel like they just like the sob story. And every person, when you're writing an application for something, they say, use your sob story. It'll get you somewhere. It probably will. But then, at some point, you feel like, do I deserve this because of a sob story? And what she told me had so much impact on me. She said, it's not the sob story, it's overcoming the sob story. It's having gotten this far despite everything that was thrown in your way. And up until then, I was focused on the SAT scores, the GPA, like, okay, these people that are getting this, they have an average of a 4.3 to a 4.5. I only had a 4.12, yeah, only. And, maybe my scores were higher than them, but I didn't take all the same classes, so how did I get here? And I was just putting it into numbers, and I wasn't thinking about life experiences and what you had to overcome to get there. And what she said really helped me that night, because I'm not sure I would be going to college on accepting a scholarship like that if she hadn't told me that, because even though, my parents would be like, are you crazy? You're turning down free money? Like, what is wrong with you? It would be weird walking through those halls, having people know, like, oh, you're a trustee scholar, but, you still weren't as great academically as those other people. So, it made me really realize that I worked just as hard, if not harder, to get where I am. Maybe my grades weren't quite as high. Maybe I didn't take quite as difficult classes. But those other people, those other students, they didn't miss all the school I missed. They didn't have all the challenges I had. They didn't have to worry about their immune system or if they were hearing things correctly, how they were going to do all that makeup work. I'm not going to say it was easy for them. They definitely worked hard. But it was a little bit easier for them. It was. They've always been that academic person. I started off as an academic person before I was ever diagnosed. And I thought, school will always be easy. And then these long-term side effects come in. And I used to have no problem memorizing. I could memorize this entire speech. Can't now, trust me, I'm reading half of this. And now it's like, okay, I have to memorize 10 words on our definitions for a quiz tomorrow. And if I read it the night before, I will forget it the next day. It's one of those things where I have to look at it and cram it 10 minutes before that quiz. And they'll say that is the worst way to learn. And it is, because you don't remember it afterwards. But it's the only way I can memorize it enough to even get through it. And it's tough starting out at a level that you're used to and having it kind of go downhill, because a lot of these long-term side effects isn't like, okay, this is how it's going to be for the rest of time. It's, okay, this may stay like this, but quite often it's going to get worse. As you grow up, it gets harder and it gets more difficult, and you think, I already have it bad enough. Why does it have to get worse? So understanding these standards that are put on us, and while it definitely helps and it definitely makes the playing field a little more level, it can also get into your psyche. And it makes you think, I'm being put with all these other people. How do I deserve that if I'm not quite up to par with that, academically or socially or in any skill? But what we're not factoring in is our own hard work. We're not thinking, they might have just studied for 20 minutes last night and I spent 3 hours trying to memorize this so that I could get through it and get, even if it was just a B. Personally, I cry when I get a B. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. But it's so much more work to be put in. And while I understood that, I didn't give myself credit for that. And that was one of the hardest things, accepting that, I may not be as good as these other people out here. I may not be as smart. I may not be as athletic. I may not be any of that. But you can't tell me I didn't work just as hard or not harder to get where I am. And I've got to be proud about that. And everyone should be proud of where they've gone. But especially when you have all of these things getting in your way that just, they're trying to convince you, don't get out of bed today. you don't want to deal with this. It's never going to be great, but you can make it great. I mean, it takes a lot more work. It really does. And if I had known that to begin with, I might never have started. I might have just been like, okay, I'm going to take the easiest classes I can think of and just survive. But I pushed myself. And at times there were a lot of mental breakdowns. There was a lot of crying. There was a lot of, okay, I can't do this anymore, self-destruct. But you get through it eventually. And while it takes a lot of extra time, a lot of effort, and a lot of support, it's worth it. If someone told me, you have these side effects, you will most likely not get into a great college. You won't get a great scholarship. You may never be healthy enough to hold down that job. It might be too stressful. I'd be like, okay, I'll give up. I will work at a minimum wage job the rest of my life. Maybe I won't even get a job. Maybe I will live with my parents, playing video games in our basement, especially Call of Duty. Gotta get the anger out somehow. Better it be on little pixels than people. But because nobody told me how hard it was going to be, I was motivated to do it. Because the more someone tells you how hard it's going to be, the more it's like they're trying to tell you, don't do it. If someone had told me, it's going to be hard, it's going to be worth it, then you're going to have a lot of nights where you don't know if you can do it, but you're going to pull through, I'd say, okay, thank you for that advice. I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to see how far I can get. And I'm just going to do the best I can. And there's how is a child with additional needs viewed? Adults versus peers. With the peers, there's a lot of different views, but one of the most common ones is, you're so lucky you don't have to do this, you're so lucky you don't have to take this class, you're so lucky you don't have to do gym class, you don't have to take foreign language. Why, yes. I am so incredibly lucky I do not have to deal with 2 or 3 years of some foreign language because I will never, ever be able to hear the world properly again. Now would you like to rethink your statement? But they don't understand that. They think right now you don't have to take that class. You are lucky. They don't think, oh, you're going to have to deal with that side effect that makes it so you cannot take this class for the rest of your life. And it's almost a sense of jealousy. Like, oh, you're lucky, you don't have to do this, you're getting a shortcut here. I'm not getting a shortcut. I'm getting a long cut throughout life. I may not have to take one class in high school, but I will have to work so much harder to get through the rest of life. I will have to work so much harder to get the same opportunities you do, to not be singled out, to not be told, you're not right for this, because we need someone who is fully functioning. So they don't understand. And we can have as many of those presentations at school that tell them about, this is what these kids go through, and this is why the way they are, but they won't understand it because they're not living it. We may watch one of those presentations and say, I totally understand that better. I understand that is why the special education class has the classes they do. I understand why these kids act the way they do. But we don't. We think we do. We don't. I just listened to a presentation a few weeks ago on autism. And one of the things that was mentioned was about the fluorescent lighting, how it can set it off. And me and my friend made a connection to, oh, that's why the special education room has the pink tinting over their lighting. And we felt like we were geniuses at that point. Like, we made a connection. But we still have no idea why that child has those certain impulses to do what they do, why they can't interact the same way. Even doctors don't understand it. As much as they've studied it, they don't live it, and you have to live it to understand it. And that is the problem with trying to educate people, because they won't live it, and so they won't understand it. It's not like you can just be like, okay, you now have a brother or sister that has this disability, and you are going to live with them for a year and understand it. Now, if we could do that, the world might be a better place. But we can't. And they there's no way that any presentation, that any PowerPoint, that any speech is going to make them understand that. And that is hard to accept. As someone who wants to be able to change this and tell people, you don't need to be so judgmental about that. They're not going to realize that. They're going to say, that's something different than what I am. I don't understand it, and because I don't understand it, I'm going to judge it because I feel insecure about not understanding it. And they won't admit that's how they feel and that's why they're doing it. But deep down inside, if you're making fun of something, if you're judging something and you don't understand it, chances are you're judging it because you feel insecure about not having that knowledge, not having that experience that someone else has to understand that. And that's hard to deal with, the feeling of being insecure. And then there is how it's viewed by an adult. And it's constantly like, oh, you poor thing. What am I, a stray dog? Like, I'm not in a shelter and you're like, oh, I'm gonna adopt you today. I'm not, you poor thing. Like, yes, I had to work harder, but I am not some mangy mutt on the side of the road that you think you are saving and, you're gonna play God. I'm a human being. And one thing that just blew my mind, I had someone come up to me and they wanted to pray for me, and I'm like, okay, I'm not religious, but everyone has their religions and go right ahead. And then I got into the prayer, and it was to fix what was wrong with me, to fix what was wrong with my ears. They don't work. They don't work normally. But to say, I want God to fix what is wrong with you, it's like, what is wrong with me? It's not wrong, it's different. It's not like those, you don't hear the same, so there's something about you that is wrong. You don't walk the same, there's something about you that is wrong. It's different, it's unique. No, I don't have the same hearing as everyone else, but they can't have nearly as many funny conversations when I misinterpret things. Nearly as many. Especially if you get me and my grandmother and my grandfather together. Ooh. It's like playing telephone in a club with music blaring. We had some funny conversations. But they overcompensate. Adults that don't understand it, they overcompensate. And they don't realize, you're talking to a human being there. It's not like you're talking to a little baby who can't defend themselves. They're like, oh my gosh, are you okay? I'm so sorry. How do you deal with this? I'm not looking for your pity. I'm really not. I've got enough pity for myself. I have to get over my own pity. I don't need your pity. I don't need you feeling bad for me, because that's not going to help me in life. Listen, try to understand, and then treat me like a normal human being. Because while they think they're helping, they're not. They're hindering us. They're making us feel like we don't belong. And that can be just as bad as people who make fun of it. But the reason they do that too is because they don't understand either. They think, as an adult, I've experienced this, I've come in contact with more people. I totally understand it. I've heard about it, but they don't understand it. They don't have a child going through that. They weren't a child at one point that was going through that. And so while they think they might have more knowledge on the topic, they don't have the experience. And in today's world, experience is everything. You can read 100 books about why people do what they do, why this side effect happens, and why it influences you the way it does. But until you've experienced it, it's just words on a page. It's just knowledge in your head that you cannot wrap your mind around. And it's difficult for people who don't understand to realize that they don't understand. If it was a math problem and you don't know how to fix it, you don't know how to find the answer, it's no problem to say, I don't understand. But when it comes to human beings and real life and, something that I think I should understand, and, I'm a cultured person, I'm not stuck up, I'm diverse and everything, they think, I definitely understand this because I do not single people out, and I'm nice to everyone. But just because you don't understand doesn't mean you don't care. And people are associating those two, like, as if they say, I don't understand, saying, I don't care and I don't want to know. Saying I don't understand is saying, I haven't been through what you've been through. I can't understand what you're feeling, what you're going through, but I'd like to learn about it. I'd like to know how to react in these situations. And people are incapable of saying that at times. They cannot put their own pride aside to say, I'm a human being, I have faults. One of my faults is that I am not able to have all the experiences in the world, to understand everything no matter how hard I try. So would you like to help me understand so that I can interact with your child, with you, with everyone around you in an appropriate manner? And it's hard as someone who deals with that to accept that, that they're doing it because they're human. You want to blame them and say, why are you being that way? So it took a long time to accept, that it's not their fault necessarily that way. It's that, once again, they don't understand that they are that way. And they don't understand that they don't understand. So with talking about the side effects, with my senior project, it was focused on just childhood cancer survivors and the side effects they go through and how it interacts with their life. And as I was preparing for this, I was broadening it, and I'm thinking, how in the world am I ever going to cover all of this? There are all of these parents out here who have children who have had experiences that I haven't gone through. And the more I did it, the more I realized the similarities. And the more similarities I saw, the more I realized, I may not understand completely. I cannot claim that I understand the experiences of every child who has had any disability or side effect or disease. But I can understand, in a vague way, what it is like to be treated so differently because of something like that, because people don't understand. And as I did this project, I was thinking, I just have to do this to graduate high school. I already know everything about my own experience. And I thought, making my application of knowledge, is what we call it, so broad, is that going to hurt my project? And the more I did it, and the more I've been speaking, even just now, the more I'm realizing I really don't care. It's not about the project anymore. It's about what I've learned, things that I thought I already knew. We all make the mistake of thinking we understand something that we don't. Maybe we understand it to a certain extent, but realizing that, just because my IEP doesn't cover, actual academics or lowering my coursework or doing it in a different way, doesn't mean that I haven't been through similar things. Because I don't have an intellectual disability doesn't mean that I don't understand what it's like to have a disability. And that really changed how I viewed things. And I would like to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to change things like that. And I would like to applaud all of you for all of the hard work you do with your children and everyone else, that you put in so much more time that people don't really understand. And a lot of times you may give up certain friendships because they don't understand, but you make new friendships with new people that understand things. And that's really what life and friendship is about. So thank you.